Hi everyone and welcome to the Allplane Podcast, where we talk with the movers and shakers that are redefining the future of commercial aviation. As usual, before we start, I would like to remind you that all previous episodes of this podcast, as well as many other aviation stories, are available on the Allplane website. That's Allplane.tv, Allplane.tv. Today's guest is someone that knows the airline business inside out. Jay Sorensen has more than 3 decades of experience in the airline industry and is the founder and CEO of IdeaWorksCompany, a consulting firm that advises airlines and travel companies all over the world. He's also known in airline circles because every year he publishes a series of in-depth reports about the state of the airline industry. The IdeaWorks Yearbook of Ancillary Revenue, which Jay's company produces in cooperation with CarTrawler, has become a sort of work of reference for all those interested in this aspect of the airline business. IdeaWorks publishes also the annual Big Book of Travel Data, which has a title that is kind of self-explanatory. So I invited Jay to the podcast for a conversation in particular about airline ancillaries, because at a time when many full-service airlines are embracing some of the a la carte elements that had traditionally been part of the low-cost carriers' business model, and also with budget carriers continuously looking for new ways to monetize their passengers, I thought it would be interesting to hear what Jay has to say about this topic. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about trends in airline ancillary revenue, about which ancillaries have become more popular lately, and where there's still a clear boundary in this field between the legacy carriers on one side and the low-cost airlines on the other. And now, without further ado, let me welcome Jay to the podcast. Hello, Jay. How are you?
Good morning, Mikhail.
Good to have you here. I've been following you for a very long time. I think you are one of the people out there that knows the most about the airline business, airline revenue, airline strategy, and an area that I would like to discuss today in depth, which is ancillaries. First of all, let me just make a quick short introduction about who you are. You are Jay Sorensen. You are the founder and the CEO of IdeaWorksCompany, which is a consulting firm. You produce research as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got into the aviation industry? Because I think you've got about 40 years experience, and that's very impressive. I'm sure you have lots of interesting knowledge and insights to share here today with our listeners.
I never thought I'd have nearly 40 years. Yeah, I'm on 39 years, and I started in the airline industry in 1984. It worked for a company, actually before that, because I was a volunteer sales rep for a tiny little airline in Wisconsin when I was going to school, when I was going to college. But we'll count the paid part of my experience in the airline industry. So I've been working in the industry since 1984, and spent 12 years with a startup in the United States called Midwest Express. And it was a high quality airline, and I left there as director of marketing. And it was there that I began to really apply ancillary revenue concepts to my job there. It didn't have that name back then, but I left that airline in 1996 to start the IdeaWorksCompany consulting firm. And we have a mixed bag of activities. Yes, we do research. We write reports on behalf of sponsors such as CarTrawler and Allianz Partners. And we also do direct consulting to airlines. And I think that's my background in the industry is actually having been an employee at a startup is ever so helpful in the consulting area. Then briefly, that is the areas that we focus on. In terms of what work we do, yes, we specialize in ancillary revenue. We have, over the course of time, really defined that category. Also loyalty marketing, branding, and just general airline marketing and retail.
Okay. What sort of airline was Midwest? Because I think it hasn't been around for a while, isn't it?
No, it shut down in the 2000s, and it was probably one of the most unique airlines that ever flew because it was started by Kimberly-Clark Corporation, the people who make Kleenex and Huggies diapers. And they ran it they initially had a corporate shuttle, and then they said, hey, let's expand it into an airline. And it was a high quality airline. I've not come across an airline that offered a product like this. It was all 2x2 leather covered seating with meals served on china, gourmet meals. We spent a tremendous amount of money on food, and it was really tailored to serve the business traveler. But as the airline grew, it obviously we needed to pick up leisure components as well. And so people who travel on Midwest Express on a Super Saver fare had an unbelievable experience that was unlike any other.
Interesting, because now we are seeing some airlines trying to reintroduce this idea of the, let's say, the premium experience, but without going all the way to the private jet. We've seen recently, I think just a few days ago in Bermuda Air in the Middle East as well, this Beyond kind of recovering this idea of the premium experience on an unscheduled airline. Anyway, I just wanted to actually take the conversation into another segment of the industry. There's a lot of experimentation with ancillaries. Can you tell us the sort of work you do at IdeaWorks tracking all these ancillaries? Because you publish every year, a report about ancillary revenue, where you track what all the different airlines, well, not all of them, but a very significant number of airlines are doing in the field of ancillaries and the main trends. Tell us a bit more about the work you do there.
So every spring and at the end of the winter, we begin a process of looking for disclosures online, and we review about 300 different airlines to try to identify financial disclosures that they have made. In doing this for more than 10 years, we also created a new publication. It's the third year we published the Big Book of travel data, and that includes the airline industry, the hotel business, car rentals, and online travel agencies. And that really grew as that was an outgrowth of our ancillary revenue work. But when we look at these 300 airlines, we attempt to identify by looking at financial reports, investor presentations, press releases, whatever we can find, we siphon up all this information and we publish it. And it's the Yearbook of Ancillary Revenue for the airline industry. And so we, at the end of September, we're going to release the 2023 edition of it, which is based upon 2022 financial data. Mm-hmm. We just released the 2023 Yearbook of Travel data. So all of these kind of work hand in hand when we spend all this time over the course of the spring scouring the planet for financial disclosures that we can use in either of these two publications.
I guess the difficulty here is how you make sense of all these different data, possibly different standards, different ways of looking at things and defining the different products that they are offering, basically. So how you manage to kind of standardize that?
We have a definition on our website of ancillary revenue, and it has been in place probably for 15 years, and it fortunately for me and for IdeaWorks, it has become a global standard. It's popped up in any number of different places. It's popped up in investor presentations that airlines give. It's popped up it's appeared in annual reports. And so there is some standardization in terms of the reporting. And the reporting becomes better with LCCs because they are very they have pride in what they're doing, and it's a story they want to tell their investors. And so they typically have very robust financial reporting of their ancillary revenue activities. As we leave the LCC category and reach into traditional airlines, the reporting is far less robust and scant. And so, yes, the yearbook, the results are truest, are the most accurate at the top end, where airlines are eager to disclose everything they can, notably LCCs and generally the U.S. majors. As we move down the list, less and less is disclosed, and so it is not a complete picture of ancillary revenue activities for all the airlines, but we put together the best picture we can.
You touch upon a very important point that I wanted to bring up. Nowadays, in 2023, how clear is the boundary between the traditional airlines and the low-cost airlines when it comes to the business model? Because when the low-cost airlines first emerged, there was such a clear distinction. You had the all-inclusive airline and then the airline where you had to pay for every ancillary. But now we are seeing many, at least in the short and medium haul, and in Europe for sure. I don't know in the US what the situation is, but we're seeing more and more, let's say, traditional airlines that are stripping their short and medium haul product of all the extras and offering something that it's quite similar to what the low-cost airlines are offering. How do you see this, let's say, this categorization of the airline industry? Does it still make sense?
Well, people in the industry laugh sometimes at the phrase low cost carriers, and it's something that is applied, I think, far too frequently. I think in many cases, some of these airlines are not low cost carriers; they are low fare airlines, meaning that they are charging low fares, but they don't have the low cost basis to support that activity. Prior to the pandemic, there was an interesting trend that was occurring, and that was low cost carriers were reaching up to try to grab more business travelers. And they were doing this through improved product improvement and tailoring products that would appeal to business travelers. Likewise, there was a move, courtesy of basic economy fares, by traditional or global network airlines to reach down and to try to attract more low-cost passengers through products such as the unbundling of their product. And I think the pandemic created a pretty significant disruption there as it applies to business travelers. And the business traveler category is down about 25%. And I think that that's a 25% that's gone forever, and because of work from home and just the improvements made in online technology so that you can avoid travel by meeting virtually. I think that that has had a permanent impact on the industry. So that has shifted the dynamic around, because what's happened is global traditional airlines now are going to have to figure out how to make their business class cabins work on long haul routes at lower yields and less business traffic. And so I think you're going to see those cabins shrink because the premium that you can get from leisure travelers to sit in those seats is just not going to be financially viable. I think the big thing that's going to occur for them is a significant growth of premium economy, and that is this in-between class for the traditional airlines. For the LCCs, I think there's also some of this at play as well, in that I think that you will see less activity in lie flat and more in a better premium economy product. So in a way, Mikhail, your question is pointing towards, I think, the conclusion you were wondering about, and that is there a blur between these two categories? And of course, there's a blur, and the blur is the cost structure. Or I'm sorry, not the blur, but the distinction is the cost structure. A low cost carrier, by definition, has to have a low cost structure, and that is something that many of the global network carriers just can't touch. They were able to touch it. They were able to offer premium economy fares prior to the pandemic because they had cross-subsidization available from business travelers. That has severely weakened. So I think the global network carrier's ability to play the LCC game is going to be handicapped, at least from a economic performance perspective. Airlines will always, of course, price their products where they need to, regardless of whether or not they're making money. But I think we're going to see over the course of time, I'm not a fan of basic economy for a lot of these global network airlines, because I think, when you go into the booking path to buy a product like this from a major global network carrier, we all come across that page, that pop-up that says, basically, this is a premium economy product. Are you sure you want to buy it? Because it has all of these problems associated with it. And then you have to click, yes, I accept these conditions, and then you move forward. I think anytime that a company has to put a caveat in front of the customer that says, this product is not very attractive. Are you sure you want to buy it? That should tell something to the company that's perhaps a product they should not be selling. Mm-hmm. And so I think that these global network carriers really have to think hard about whether or not they want to be telling their customers that, because I think it degrades the entirety of their product when they do that.
Mm-hmm. And who, in your opinion, who is doing ancillaries best? Is there a specific airline that stands out, or a group of airlines that stand out when it comes to monetizing all these extras?
So within the LCC category, I'll offer a further split. And there are LCCs that are just great low-cost carriers. And then there are LCCs that are trying to become travel companies. And so within Europe, Jet2.com, which I think is an unbelievable powerhouse of revenue production in terms of, they have, I don't know if they have said it, but, they are a leisure company that happens to own an airline. And I think that was the phrase that Allegiant Air used for a long time, if perhaps informally. But Jet2.com has done an exceptional job of retail in terms of positioning themselves to the customer as a vacation solution company. Then you have traditional LCCs, and I think I really like Ryanair and EasyJet. I think Ryanair really nails the online product in terms of online product, meaning how they retail. There is definitely a science that they take to determining how best to maximize the revenue they are able to attract from every customer.
And you are publishing this report in a few weeks' time. Can you give us some advance of the ancillary trends? Where are they going? What are the main findings that you can advance us now? Just a little nugget to so that we can understand better where this post-pandemic airline industry is going.
Well, you're not going to get much out of me in terms of a sneak peek at the yearbook. However, there was a trend that occurred during the pandemic in which people were willing to pay a significant premium for more comfort and convenience. And that was early boarding, sitting in the front of the cabin, and actually larger seating. So there would be some perceived greater distance between them and other passengers. I think that will have peaked during the pandemic. And so on a yield basis, I think we're going to see a decrease going forward. Overall, the ancillary revenue numbers will be up because it's largely tied to traffic production. But I think that there was a peaking of sorts for certain comfort-related a la carte products that occurred during the pandemic. And I saw some evidence that began to decrease during 2022.
Mm-hmm. What is the king of the ancillaries? What are the ancillaries that, if there's any, that kind of stands out in terms of revenue, or the ones that are more widely accepted by the passengers?
Well, I think in terms of acceptance, baggage is the king, because people understand that when I give you something to handle, like a piece of checked baggage, that there is a service associated with that. And that service obviously costs the airline money to handle the bag and to deliver it to me upon arrival. So I think that over the course of time, baggage has become something that has been accepted. I'll toss in a caveat here, and that is cabin baggage. And the airlines that, no matter what an airline does in terms of its baggage policy, people love to have their carry-ons. And people even who fly Southwest, which offers 2 free checked bags, Southwest still has a carry-on issue. And that provides evidence to me that people love their carry-ons, even when they are offered 2 checked bags as part of their as part of any fare that Southwest offers. So baggage is something that has gained acceptance. Carry-on baggage, not so much, but I'll tell you that airlines that charge for large carry-ons, that have policies that monitor what happens at the gate and what people are allowed to carry on the plane, those airlines generate very attractive revenue. And quite frankly, the cabin environment is far less cluttered, and the boarding process is far quicker. Reaching that point of nirvana is a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, there seems to have been a change in policy here in the last couple of years. I mean, you're seeing even full service carriers starting to be a lot more strict about these carry-ons and charging for them. In some cases, even to the point that it's difficult to understand the policy, because I think I was checking some tickets the other day here in Europe in a low-cost airline, and some fares include the check-in, but they don't include the carry-on.
I think what you're seeing is confusion on the airline front in terms of, they have policies in place that charge people for checked bags, and they have policies in place which are intended to limit what you carry on. enforcing those policies is really difficult. It's very difficult to do it at your hub, and it's very difficult to do it at locations across the network, some which may be handled by you and some which are handled by contractors. I was in over the spring, I was at, whenever I pass through a low cost carrier hub, I spent some time there, and I was at Luton Airport in London, and I spent probably about 3 hours watching what was happening with the boarding process for EasyJet, Wizz, and Ryanair. And granted, things will vary by location, but I was surprised. By far, the carrier that was the most diligent and I'll say restrictive in terms of what people were allowed to take on board the plane was EasyJet. I would have guessed that they would have been the most lenient, but no, they were by far the most strict. And the one that seemed to be the most lenient was surprisingly Wizz. So again, I mean that's a sampling of one location, but it demonstrates how difficult it is to implement these bag policies. One of the things that we've been hired to do is to help airlines sort out their bag issues. And oftentimes what happens is you'll have a marketing team that will be implementing a program, and very poor communication exists with the operations people at the airport. Oftentimes they are actively working against each other. So that's one of the things that we do is we go in there and act as a diplomat to try to help create a policy that everyone can support.
There's been also something that many airlines have been trying to crack, get a larger portion of the, let's say, the whole travel cycle revenue, all the way from the moment that the passenger, the traveler is starting to plan the trip, all the way to the post-trip experience, including here everything, hotels, activities, all sorts of services connected to the travel experience. Has any airline really managed to crack this? I know, for example, I think in Asia, airlines like AirAsia have managed a degree of success in things like the Super App, but aren't we a bit far from this becoming a reality in places like the US and Europe, where the airline becomes like let's say, a holistic travel provider?
So, I mean, coming back to Jet2.com in Europe, I think that they have achieved that. They have achieved the status of being a travel company, a travel retailer.
Yes,
in the US.
But if I might add here something, Jet2 has a very well-defined market, which is basically carrying holidaymakers from specific locations in the UK, not necessarily London, from other parts of the UK, to some very specific points in the south of Europe, in Mediterranean, Canary Islands. So it's kind of it's big volume, but still pretty niche. But I'm thinking, yeah.
But what's interesting about what they're doing is, first off, they're contracting with hotels directly. Mm-hmm. The vast majority of what they're offering to their customers is contract directly. That's unusual, where an airline will contract directly with properties. Secondly, they offer a tremendous amount of support. I think they have a lot of staff that are in these destinations that do two things. One is they try to work with customers to sell even more services while they are at the destination. And secondly, they're there to iron out problems. So that level of care is unique in the world in terms of having staff on location working with travelers. In the US, I think the carrier that has done the best job would be Allegiant, of course. Again, they contract a lot of their own hotels and car hire, and they are very much a leisure-oriented airline. AirAsia is an interesting carrier. They certainly are making a grand effort to become, whenever I read about Elon Musk and what he has done with Twitter and where he wants to take Twitter as X.com in terms of being a super app leaning towards the financial needs of customers, I think of AirAsia, because what AirAsia is attempting to do is, through their galaxy of companies that have an affiliation with the AirAsia brand, from hotels to food delivery to food to fast food, to insurance, banking, the loyalty program, they are attempting a widespread hug around all the consumer's needs. They are at a very early phase in that process, and I don't think that their results are very strong yet. It's interesting when you read their annual report. There is very little information about the airline in it. All the normal statistics that you would find in an annual report are missing from the AirAsia annual report, and so clearly they are trying to create something very different there. I can't mark that as success yet, but they certainly are making a grand effort, and it is the most interesting effort being made in the world in that regard.
Yeah, well, I think quite a few airlines are trying to do this, but someone in the industry the other day told me, like, well, yeah, I mean, airlines get lots of traffic, for example, to their websites, but it's not necessarily, let's say, a repeat traffic, in the sense that it's not like people are logging in every day into the airline's website for the daily needs in the same way that they might do on Google or Amazon or other digital platforms that can offer all these very broad range of services. So yeah, I'm curious whether any airline will eventually manage to to get to this level, to become a digital business.
The key here is, and this is the most difficult part for an airline to understand. If you want to retail to the customer, you have to retail everything to the customer. And so airline websites have traditionally been closed stores, meaning that they only sell the products of that airline. AirAsia has taken the approach where they are attempting to convert their website into an OTA type platform where you can book any airline. And you can, if I were still shopping for the lowest fare, I would go to an OTA. But AirAsia every day is getting closer and closer to that. So my belief is, when an airline only sells its products, the customer immediately thinks that airline website is biased against offering the best deal regardless of the supplier. And that belief extends from the airline, from air travel to hotel and car hire. Mm-hmm. And so I think that airlines will always be their results will be crimped when they don't become robust sellers of everything. And that's going to be a big jump. Actually, weirdly enough, when websites first came out, I'm guessing like in the 90s, for probably a half a year period, when you visited United and American's website, you saw everything. You saw availability on everyone. Yeah. And you could book anyone. And that was because they weren't able to create their own website. They were basically turning on the GDS display for their customers, which was obviously provided by Amadeus or Sabre, and it showed all the airlines. Mm-hmm. That's here, and I think that I understand why that happened. It's a natural progression, but I also think it's a natural progression for airlines for some airlines that want to become true retailers, to begin to sell the products of their competitors.
Yeah, well, I was involved in an airline project, a new airline launch, and one of the projects was actually to become a retailer. Wanted to sell a bit like a supermarket, selling all sorts of products, not just travel related, but the difficulty was how you make that the obvious choice for the customer. Because personally, I don't know if I would go to an airline website to do shopping, daily shopping. So
and that's another problem, because you wouldn't naturally think of going to an airline website to do general shopping. That's because the airline often doesn't do a very good job of being an airline to begin with. And so, why would you trust them with more things? And so that's another challenge for the industry. So I am not a big fan of this, like, we're going to try to become everything to everyone. I think that there are companies that are better positioned to do that, like a Walmart, like an Amazon. But it's interesting, those companies, and even Google, have always struggled with travel retail. I think in the U.S., what we're going to see is the credit card companies, the banks, owning this space. And then what I mean by that is Chase, Citi, and Capital One, and of course American Express. I think they will become the master retailers of travel.
We were talking about the airlines trying to become retailers, but we could end up with actually the opposite situation as well, like some digital platforms or retailers being a lot better than airlines at selling tickets and all the rest. And as you mentioned, financial institutions, credit card companies. I was thinking, for example, Google or Amazon, if they manage to
What's interesting about let's take each of those. Google has never had luck selling directly to customers. They struggle with that in terms of having a business, a B2C success. I think eludes Google, and so Google Flights, yes, is it a helpful tool? Absolutely. Has the company maximized their presence in travel? No. And they easily could, because they control the inboxes of millions of people worldwide, and the data that they're able to capture from that activity is immense. But nonetheless, they really have never persevered there. Then the other one is Amazon. And travel is very much a service business. And, it's one thing to deliver products, and no one delivers products globally better than Amazon to its customers. But in terms of a service-oriented retail presence, I think that Amazon would have a very difficult role there. So again, I think it's in the U.S. at least, it's going to be the banks. The banks are already well down that path in terms of creating travel portals that, again, they don't care who they sell to. They're a bank. They want to offer everyone they want to offer all suppliers under their retail website.
Mm-hmm.
They just want the transaction.
So in terms of ancillaries, is everything invented, or do you see some scope to introduce new types of services or products that would make sense in the typical airline booking path, but they are not near the level where they should be, or that they haven't been introduced by any airline yet so far?
I think everything is practically invented. I don't foresee any type of new product category coming up. The future for the industry in terms of ancillary revenue is tied to two activities. One is better retailing. That is to get more people to buy more things. And connected to that is better pricing. And that is creating pricing that maximizes revenue, which of course may mean that the price is reduced for some customers or the price is increased for some customers. So those two areas, better retailing and better price management, are the two growth areas that face ancillary revenue for the future.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jay, for
your
insights today. I think it's very useful, and ancillaries and revenue are always a current topic in the airline industry. So we'll be waiting for the publication of this report with data from 2022. What date is this going to be published?
The Card Trawler Yearbook of Ancillary Revenue is due out September 27th.
September 27th.
Correct.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we'll be waiting, and definitely we'll have a look through to see what's the latest in ancillary revenue. In the meantime, well, wishing you all the best, and thank you so much for being here in the podcast, sharing your insights.
Thank you for having me on board.
Before you go, and if you like this podcast, a quick reminder that it would be absolutely great if you could please give it a rating on Apple, Spotify, or whichever platform you're using. or recommend it to a friend or whomever might be interested. Thank you very much and see you soon.